Ready. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Fireside Chat, A New Hope for Healthcare Innovation, AI. Welcome Jason Mellad, CEO and co-founder of StartCodon, and Grace Colón, CEO of Incarda Therapeutics. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Fatty. We're super excited to be here, and we're going to cover a few topics in healthcare, particularly about AI and the role of AI in drug discovery and development, as well as healthcare delivery. And I have the great pleasure of being here today with Dr. Jason Mellad, who is, by the way, a longtime friend and colleague of mine, so I'm thrilled to be here with him. Jason is a scientist entrepreneur who's passionate about translating innovative technologies into better patient outcomes. As CEO and co-founder of StartCodon, a Cambridge, UK-based accelerator, he aims to identify and fund disruptive early-stage life science startups. Previously, he was CEO of Cambridge Epigenetics, a liquid biopsy diagnostics company. Jason has a PhD from the University of Cambridge and a BSc from Tulane University, and he lives with his husband and son in England.
Thank you, Grace, so much. It's such an honor to be here with you, and thank you for thinking of me when you had this opportunity. And also for being such a wonderful friend and mentor all these years. So Grace has over 25 years of experience in biopharma, genomics, healthcare, and industrial biotechnology. She has held executive and management positions at Gilead, Affymetrix, Entrexa, and McKinsey, and has been a senior partner at a venture capital firm and CEO, board member, and/or advisor at several early-stage biotech companies. She has served on multiple boards, both public, private, and nonprofit, and is a strong advocate for mentorship, diversity and inclusion, and social entrepreneurship. She has a PhD from MIT and a bachelor's from Penn, both in chemical engineering. She lives with her husband and 3 kids in the wonderful Los Gatos, California.
Thanks, Jason. So first, just a quick overview of some of the areas of healthcare and AI, the use of AI in healthcare. Obviously, there are many, many more, such as healthcare operations and privacy, data security, and so forth. But this slide really focuses on some examples in drug discovery and development and healthcare delivery. So clearly, AI has played a huge role in the advancement in all of these areas. Certainly, we're going to talk about in a minute about an example in drug discovery and development and diagnostics that Jason was involved in. But also it's incredibly important in areas such as, systems biology, both for discovery, but also for, and actually in other areas beyond healthcare that have a relationship to healthcare, such as improved food production. And also, of course, the increasingly interesting area of microbiome, where there are many times more organisms in the body than human cells, and the complexity of the interactions of the signals that those, the bacteria and other microbes generate, and how they interact with the human body and metabolize medicines and so forth is a huge, important area where AI can make a significant difference. In the area of healthcare delivery, of course, there are a number of new applications having to do with care monitoring, patient engagement, diagnosis, and obviously a big one of interest right now is population health management, which is very timely with what's going on with COVID, a very complex area and really important and will continue to be important in the future. So Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about Cambridge Epigenetics? The area of epigenetics is such a huge growing area and very important as we seek to understand the role of certain pathways in the body and how folks metabolize drugs and so forth.
Definitely, Grace. And it's one of those fascinating areas where I look at it as kind of the next stage in our understanding of human physiology and indeed the fundamental building blocks of life. Epigenetics is what we can call the control layer for the genome. So we all know about G, C, A, and T, and the inheritance we get from our mother and father in pretty much equal parts. But the fact is that you go from a single cell embryo to multiple hundreds of different specialized cell types, but they all have the same fundamental genetic code. But epigenetically, they're distinct. And the epigenome is what comes in to regulate how those genes are interpreted, both in terms of time and aspects. So the question then is, how does AI and epigenetics go hand in hand? Well, at Cambridge Epigenetics, we started off developing tools for studying these novel marks. And that's actually when I first met you, Grace, when you guys made the investment into us many moons ago. And you said, well, you know what, you've got this fundamental technology, but what are the higher applications? What are the clinical use cases that you could actually pursue? So Cambridge Epigenetics became a liquid biopsy diagnostics company when I became CEO, because we realized that these epigenetic marks were particularly good for early detection of cancer. So the example here shows a signal that we had in colorectal cancer, and how we were able to develop a platform for the early detection and therefore better outcomes in patients. Now, importantly, epigenetics is quite dynamic. And so you end up with a situation where you have a test and a platform where you're measuring marks that change over time. And as you continue to measure patients, you develop better algorithms for detecting cancer and other diseases early. Importantly, the same platform can be looking for early detection of cancer, but also cardiovascular disease, neurological disease, et cetera, because you're measuring how the environment is impacting on your genes. And that's really the power of epigenetics and how AI came to bear for the development of these signatures.
That's really great. And really, Cambridge Epigenetics has been at the forefront of many of these discoveries and innovations. So moving on to your current role at StartCodon, tell us about what you guys are doing. It's very exciting.
Yes, well, it's really interesting because the whole journey of going through Cambridge Epigenetics taught me just how challenging it is for early stage companies, AI and otherwise, to really get the guidance and support they need to bridge that equity gap early on. So StartCodon is a new strategic initiative. It's an accelerator based in Cambridge, UK. I'm always looking to bridge over to Cambridge in the States, but it's the original Cambridge, I like to say. And what we're trying to do is leverage the resources we have in the Cambridge area to help more companies, the Incardas of the future, the Cambridge Epigenetics of the future, to be successful. We take a bit of equity up front, we invest $250K in a safe, we provide mentoring, guidance, and support, and we're very fortunate to have the support of our partners at Roche and Genentech, who are founding members of StartCodon, but also Novartis, which came on board recently.
Tell us more about what's going on in Cambridge and why it's a great place to do this.
Well, definitely. I mean, some of these press releases that just highlight the fact that AI and health in particular, there is a massive growth in the Cambridge area. And what's fascinating is that Cambridge itself is a fertile ground, not only for AI and healthcare, but also AI and tech, and using those individuals who can then transition into a healthcare role. And in fact, for StartCodon, I remember, Grace, when we were talking about this, I went back and did an analysis of the companies we see in our deal flow pipeline. And currently, at least 40% of them have AI as a specific focus for healthcare. So it really just shows that this is not a niche anymore, it's becoming mainstream. And in fact, we ask every company that applies to us, whether they're therapeutics or diagnostics, medtech, digital health, doesn't matter, what is your informatics strategy? Because we feel that every company we look at in the future will have to have informatics, AI, and machine learning component.
That's great. But there is also a potential risky dark side to AI. And there's a particular example close to home where you are. Tell us about that.
Cambridge Analytica. Oh, we could spend a whole other conversation on this one, but I think they came to be part of the zeitgeist because of what they did with the Facebook and the certain, let's say, electioneering that they were involved in. Now, what I think that there's always a silver lining for every cloud, that although Cambridge Analytica was arguably not using AI for good, a lot of the former employees of Analytica, particularly those who have the skill set, but not necessarily some of the ethical complications, are now in a lot of healthcare and AI companies in the Cambridge area. So out of this unfortunate kind of use of AI, misuse rather, we're now seeing that some of that know-how and some of that expertise can be used for the betterment and for better purposes. So it's interesting that Cambridge Analytica is a cautionary tale, but also that those individuals can redeem themselves by using their powers for good. Now, what's interesting is, let's go from a kind of iffy example like that to how you are forging ahead at Incarda, and how atrial fibrillation is benefiting from AI, and how you're envisioning that this is going to set up a whole new paradigm for improved patient outcomes with this condition.
Thank you, Jason. And that's a really important point. And this applies not only to atrial fibrillation, but a number of large chronic diseases. There's exciting methods to really advance paradigm. And I'll give you an example of one of the things I'm working on that really ties into the broader ecosystem of how AI is being applied, not just to diagnostics and devices, but how it can tie into treatments and therapeutics to really optimize the treatment. So atrial fibrillation is a significant global problem. In the US alone, there are over 6 million people that suffer from this abnormal heart rhythm condition, and globally over 30 million people. And it's really a progressive disease. So once you begin to have these episodes of arrhythmia, They can be short and intermittent, but over time they inevitably progress. And one of the reasons for that, and they actually can lead to stroke, they lead to significant ER visits, hospitalization, eventually to heart failure. And one of the reasons for that is there's no real good treatments to stop the episode as soon as it happens. And one of the important things that you need to have, of course, is detection, but you also need to have treatment. Many of these episodes are actually asymptomatic, but when they occur, they're actually damaging the heart. They're causing little bit by bit electrophysiological remodeling of the heart. And they're actually just for a long series of reasons, there are no treatments to stop it as soon as they start. If you could stop it as soon as it started, it would probably delay progression, reduce the risk of stroke, and have significant impact. So the state of affairs today is that AF contributes over $50 billion of cost to the healthcare system. And what's interesting is AI has played a key role in advancing understanding of this condition and actually making it quite accessible. So AliveCor is a company that has developed algorithms and software along with a device so that you can carry this in your pocket, pair it with your phone, and actually in 30 seconds detect at very high accuracy whether you're in an episode or not, and also test when it's resolved in case you're wondering if you have some symptoms and you're not sure. Apple Watch came out with one. So on my Apple Watch, in 30 seconds, I can measure whether I might be in AFib or not. But importantly, there are many companies using PPG technology on the phone where you don't even need another device. And they're using sophisticated algorithms that they've developed using, thousands and millions of data points to with fairly high accuracy. Needs some improvement, but it's getting there. So really broadening an understanding of the disease. And then companies are building services around that to say, okay, you're in arrhythmia, what can you do about it? Go see your doctor or not, or capture all the information and then use it later to really understand the progression of your disease. But the problem is there's no treatment. So one of the things I'm working on in Incarda is using a sophisticated nebulizer with an optimized formulation that can actually be delivered by inhalation in a device that a patient can have anywhere, whether in the hospital or carry around. And then therefore that enables a brand new paradigm. So if you're unsure whether you have an episode, or if you know that you suffer from this condition, someone who has more and more frequent episodes may have some asymptomatics, can check periodically whether they're in the condition, treat, and then confirm and save all the data to bring to their healthcare provider and really drastically improve the patient quality of life and outcomes. And so it's a really interesting example of how by looking at a big gap in the healthcare system and integrating all of these pieces, you could actually have potentially significantly better outcomes and lower the healthcare costs. So Jason, tell us a little bit more about other aspects of AI in healthcare where there's a fear of replacing healthcare professionals.
Well, yeah, it's an excellent point. So just bridging off of what you said for Incarda and actually being able to integrate the wearables, that's an example of next generation personalized medicine in which the physician is very much going to play a role, because I'm sure a lot of that data is not only useful for the individual patient, but also for the physician during checkups to be able to monitor progress over time, maybe to adjust dosage, maybe make some other kind of recommendations. And it's all about enhancing that clinical care pathway and that experience, and bringing us closer together with better information to inform ourselves, but also for our caregivers and maybe even insurance companies as appropriate. But there's still this fear that a lot of people say, I am going to replace this industry with AI. And all of these jobs are going to be lost, and the human experience is going to be lost. And this PwC survey in Europe and the Middle East and Asia in 2016 was really interesting because it showed that there are certain perceived advantages of using AI in healthcare. One to say that it'd be easier and quicker for people to get access, or more accurate diagnoses, et cetera, and make better recommendations of medicines. But there's also perceived disadvantages. People are worried that it's going to be impersonal, that maybe they'll be replaced, or that it's going to be more prone to error. So we have to balance those two out and make sure that we are focused on using AI to enhance what we do and not necessarily replace completely. Though we be very disruptive, obviously, technology always is, but ultimately it is about augmenting what our physicians and what these professionals can do.
Yeah, and actually a great example of that, I was on the board and an investor in a company called Perceptimed, which is developing using machine learning and computer vision to actually greatly improve identification of pills at a pharmacy. And this is incredibly important because medication error causes over $40 billion of costs in the healthcare system, about 7 to 8,000 deaths a year, and significant other sequelae for other folks. And there are many causes to medication error, but a key one is in dispensing. And think about there's over 6 or 7,000 different types of pills alone in the U.S. And how many little round white pills do you have? And even the numbers on them a lot of times aren't enough to differentiate it when you're under time pressure. So this technology could potentially greatly improve accuracy and improve the workflow, and really freeing up time of pharmacies and pharmacy technicians to really interact better with patients and do the higher level thinking in terms of catching potential, medication interactions or other things, or really help the patients another way. So there's an example where AI will improve outcomes, but also free up time of the professionals so they can really have that human interaction. So last topic we wanted to cover, a very important and timely one, which is really the topic of AI and diversity. And there have been a number of publications and a lot of attention, especially in recent years, about the fact that racial and ethnic differences in, for example, drug development really miss an opportunity. And there have been examples of drugs that have failed overall, but then we've gone back and been repurposed for a specific population because they weren't looked at correctly the first time. Also, it's important to note that, ethnic minorities make up almost 40% of the US population, yet clinical trial inclusion rates of these populations range from 2 to 16%. And this is a real problem because you want to develop drugs and treatments that really serve the population well and that really are representative. And this happens also, for example, in gender disparities in clinical trials. So it's really important that we, eliminate some of the barriers to clinical trial participation. The same is true in diagnosis. So there's been examples of AI-driven dermatology where dark skin patients, for example, miss a diagnosis of skin cancer, and that's life-threatening. And so we need to be, is one of the topics that one of the papers I saw, if AI is going to be the world's doctor, we need better textbook. But there are hope. There's hope in terms of how AI can help with diversity and really better serving populations. So the FDA issued a guidance last year about how to reduce barriers to clinical trial participation. People, when they're publishing papers, we now see they're taking into account broader factors in terms of looking at disparities in health outcomes. So one group in Chicago saw that one of the best predictors of hospital length of stay was postal codes, or underserved communities with poorer health outcomes, and they weren't even looking at that factor before. So there's greater awareness of what's important. And importantly, AI plays a key role in new technologies that are really tackling diseases with long-time unmet needs, such as sickle cell. And AI plays a key role in gene editing. And here's an example of a patient that had sickle cell disease, and was at the time, a few months ago, Helen was the youngest patient to be treated with gene therapy for this, and AI play a key role. So Jason and I really are excited about the potential for AI, going in eyes wide open of where AI can play a key role in doing the right thing, but also doing well for the healthcare, companies and researchers. And so we believe that there's a new hope ahead for AI for all. So with that in mind, I know we have a few more minutes, and I guess we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate the conversation you've been having. Right now we have one question from Anonymous. It says, should healthcare companies outsource data sourcing and labeling for developing AI-based research and products?
Grace, do you want to kick us off?
Just had to skip in the audio.
Go ahead, sorry. I'm having
Shall I reread the question?
I'm having a bad connection.
Okay, sorry. Should healthcare companies outsource data sourcing and labeling for developing AI-based research and products?
Should they outsource? Well, obviously, in my opinion, I'll comment on a couple of things and then I'll hand off to Jason. Obviously, everything comes with a caveat, right? What's important with data collection, analysis, and storage is that you have the right security in place, that you have the right control over that and how that data are used. So I do think that there are companies that are enabling that for healthcare companies, but you have to approach it with caution given some of the things we just talked about. Jason, how are you thinking about it with early stage companies where, of course, outsourcing often is the only option?
Yeah, it's a good point. So we have a lot of CRO partners that we line up, and we try to vet them in advance to make sure that they do have the necessary security protocols in place for handling that data, particularly when it's clinically sensitive information. But I'm also thinking about informed consent. It's one of the things at Cambridge Epigenetics that we had to make sure that whatever samples we were collecting, the patient, even though we went through the right channels, knew what that sample could ultimately be used to produce. So that informed consent is everything, in addition to the security as well. So always vet your partners. Outsourcing is great, but always vet the partners that you're working with.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. We have another question that says, should we be using AI not only for detection, but also for prevention and causation of life-threatening diseases like cancer?
Great question. And I'll take a cut, but Jason is certainly the oncology expert here. I do think in general, absolutely. And there are companies that are working on prevention and better understanding of integration of a number of factors that can impact near and longer term health, such as patient, not only genomic information and other types of information, but also lifestyle and behavior and other characteristics that could be important. Could be the weather, could be if someone lives in a high pollution area, their risk of COPD goes way up. So all of these things are incredibly important. And I believe there's a huge opportunity for that. And oncology is especially complex. Jason, why don't you comment on oncology?
Yeah, Grace, it's an excellent point. I mean, one of the powers of epigenetics that we think is fantastic is that it's not just, can I detect the disease early? It's at the earliest stages when you're starting to get the beginnings of the signs that something could be awry, you have an opportunity to intervene and do something about it. That's one of the powers. So there's this expression that DNA is not your destiny, and specifically in epigenetics, that's the case. You can intervene and do something. Is it changing maybe it's a medicament, or it could also just be changing your lifestyle, whatever it may be. As we build up these databases and longitudinal studies, AI is going to help us find those signals and choose the right intervention to prevent us from getting sick in the first place. I used to always say that someday having a disease will be optional, not an inevitability when it comes to cancer, and I'm hoping that'll be the case for many diseases.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Well, that's the end of our questions today. Grace and Jason, that was a really informative conversation to listen to, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate your time and your intriguing work and insights, and please continue the fight on all paths forward. To our viewers out there, we encourage you to join our Slack channel for further conversations with some of the speakers and attendees, and we'll see you during the next session. Thanks, everyone.